Welcome back to VolleyTalk. It is Tuesday, 3 p.m. Mountain Time. So, you know what that means? We're going to be talking about all things volleyball and answering any questions that you guys have regarding volleyball or anything to do with Powercore 360 training. We'll get right into this today, but Billy, I'm going to let you introduce yourself first.
Hey, Billy Glisson, founder of Powercore 360. I'm a strength coach, exercise physiologist, been involved with volleyball and power hitting 25 plus years, long time.
Yeah, long time, which is awesome. Today's topic is going to be all about volleyball arm speed and how you can develop that arm speed over time and when and what, all the things that go into training. So, we're going to dive right in with some initial questions for Billy. Like, if you have any questions about this topic or any other topic, again, please comment them and we will be sure to put them up on the screen and answer them. But to start today, Billy, let's start with what is arm speed in general? What are you talking about?
Yeah, well, relative to volleyball and to hitting or attacking, spiking, whatever term you want to use, it's about how fast you can move your arm. If your arm moves fast, you're going to hit the ball. You're going to hit the ball hard. You got a better chance of scoring. So, in volleyball, a lot of coaches relate to it as just saying arm speed, but they're really saying hit the ball hard, right? Score points.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you guys may have seen this in videos on our social medias in the past, but a way to test this is using radar guns, right? How fast somebody is hitting. That is a way that you can see what the ball, how fast the ball is coming out of your hand, and see if you're getting faster or slower. So, if you've seen videos like that before on our channel, that is what we were doing. We were testing arm speed. But let's dive into kind of where does this all start? So, what is the starting point of when athletes should start to think about developing some arm speed for volleyball?
Well, let's jump into that. Let me make one statement before that that's probably an overarching kind of umbrella statement like, why is arm speed important beyond
Yeah.
scoring? A few weeks ago, I had breakfast or coffee again with Terry Pettit, the former Nebraska coach, Hall of Fame coach, still a mentor to a lot of Division One coaches. And in our discussion, he reminded me, like, Billy, the biggest predictor of volleyball success, not even as a hitter, any athlete playing volleyball, middle school, high school, club, pro, college, whatever, he said, is arm speed, the ability to swing your arm fast, hit the ball, and score. That's the biggest predictor. So that's like, yeah, you want to score, but that's where the authorities are really saying it's super important. The number one predictor of you having success in volleyball is to have arm speed. So that's kind of an overarching statement that I want everybody to hear. Maybe then segueing into your question, there are what's considered speed development windows for athletes, right? When you're a youth, but they're a little bit different for boys and girls today. I'm going to start with the girls, and maybe we'll get into the boys. But there are two speed development windows, and those ages for the speed development windows are 6 to 8 years of age, really early, right? And 11 to 13 years of age. Okay, all right. What does that mean? It means this: those are the two primary windows, right? And it's like a 4 year window, 6 to 8 and 11 to 13, where female volleyball players need to try to develop arm speed. And you're like thinking it's 6 to 8. Yeah, I mean, we didn't design this, we didn't make any of this. We're just telling you what the research says. Here's the deal: those are the two windows of time where athletes, female athletes, those ages, need to be working on arm speed. If they work on arm speed in those points and times, they'll have a better chance of maximizing their genetic potential for arm speed, right? That's built in, wired in, their mom and dad gave them. Here's the deal. This is probably the most important piece. If an athlete, a female athlete, isn't working on arm speed or foot speed or running speed, agility, change of direction, but today for arm speed relative to that, they will never probably reach their maximal God-given genetic arm speed, right? They're going to miss it. You can still get stronger. You can be a 17 or 18-year-old athlete or 22-year-old athlete, right? Whatever the case is, volleyball player, female, you can get stronger, but the arm speed, you're never really going to maximize the genetic potential for that specific athlete. So it's super important. And, this weekend we did a clinic in Denver, and when we had a breakout session with the parents and the athletes and the coaches where we talked about this. And so I wanted to make sure and understand most of the girls, they're not all, but most of them are 13 and 14. 13 and 14 is on the upper end of the second speed development window. That's a great age. If you come in as an athlete and you haven't worked on arm speed at 16 or 17, yeah, you can probably make some improvements, but you're never really going to maximize arm speed. At 6 to 8 and really 11 to 13, volleyball athletes, even though that's still early in the scope of volleyball playing careers, they need to work on arm speed at that point in time. So that's when we go after them, right? We want 13s and 14s in our master classes, in our clinics, and because we're really trying to develop power and arm speed, if you would. Sorry, long-winded answer.
No, you kind of answered this question that we got from YouTube as well. It says, my brother Mike is a D2 player. Is there any way he can still develop this skill, or is he too old?
Yeah, well, so let's define words. Skill, yes, you can still improve the mechanics and work on the mechanics, but Mike's brother Mike, right, is a D2 player. He's probably not probably for boys, the ages are 7 to 9 and 13 to 16, a little bit older than the girls by a couple of years. He's missed his maximum arm speed development window, right? So with that being said, he can definitely improve his mechanics and technique. He can learn to hit the ball harder, but he's not going to probably ever reach his maximum potential, right? Genetic potential he had for arm speed because he didn't work on it in those windows of time.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. We have one question here, kind of going away for arm speed just for a second. It is, how can you jump higher?
Short answer,
Yeah.
strengthen your legs, make your legs stronger, learn jumping mechanics, and then take your jumping mechanics that you've improved and you built your leg strength and make it explosive. Work on plyometrics, doing the right things where you learn how to jump, learn how to land. So not only do you go up and come down, protect your knees, protect your ankles, protect your back in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get back to arm speed though. So, okay, we have the first initial stage is you said 6 to 8 for girls and 7 to 9 for boys, right?
Yes.
Okay, so how during those stage, how can parents, coaches, athletes start to identify if they are taking full advantage of these early developmental windows?
Well, and at that point in time, you're not doing heavy, fast, any kind of intensive training, right? Those are very young ages. The body's not developed, the joints, the muscles, the tendons aren't very well developed. So you're not going out and doing anything that you might do for boys when they're 13 to 16 or girls when they're 11 to 13, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So at that age, they're out, they're running, they ought to be probably playing a variety of sports. They're throwing, they're hitting things, hitting overhand, hitting baseballs, whatever. All those things will help them develop. But you're not giving a arm speed program to a 7 to 9-year-old boy or a 6 to 8-year-old girl. You just don't. But you want them to be physically active, running, throwing, skipping, jumping, changing directions, throwing balls, hitting balls. But you're not really working on fast arm per se, but their body and their nervous system, that's really what you're trying to train in the brain, the nervous system, to do some things at those young ages. I think the real keys are the second developmental window, right? Where boys and girls have probably now went through puberty, their muscles are stronger, their joints are better developed, and their nervous system and brain are ready for like an arm speed program we would do in a clinic or in our master class or something like that, right? That we're going to go out and throw balls, and we're going to throw balls and hit balls with fast arm speed. We're going to work on mechanics, we're going to work on strength, but ultimately we want their arm moving faster in our training because that's what we're trying to do is teach them to have more arm speed to hit harder, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So during this second window, then how can athletes and coaches and parents make sure that the training they're doing is also safe and avoids injuries for them in the long run? Is creating good
Yeah,
habits.
well, it's exactly it. So once again, I'll give you a little sliver into, or a little window into, pardon the pun, to the clinic we did in Denver this weekend. And, once again, I did this breakout. And so I showed the parents, the athletes, like, here's how we throw into a tarp. Here's how we throw. We use a radar gun. But what have we done first? This was 3/4 of the way through the training for the 8-hour clinic. We'd already worked on mechanics, strength, technique. So when we got into working really on arm speed now, the athletes knew how to step, they knew how to open and close their chest, right? Rotate their body, throw their arms straight, and use really good mechanics. And so we were doing that against radar guns. And by the way, we had a couple of kids, a 16-year-old girl from Kansas, right, by the name of Rowan. Hope she's okay with me saying this. She threw a ball 60 miles an hour into a net as a 16-year-old, right? That's cooking. And then we had a lot of kids in the 50s, and that's arm speed. And so that was already telling us these kids already have some arm speed now, but they have arm speed, to your question, with really good mechanics. And that answers your question. Work on the mechanics, work on the technique, work on the strength, and then throw fast, right? And we're not talking about maximum speed here either. So being intelligent and smart about the methodology used to work on arm speed. You're not going out and telling kids to throw as hard as they can, even with good technique. So that's part of being a coach, and part of what we do is with in the master class, the 2.0 version we're launching December 1st, right? It's a lot of throwing, right? Throwing balls, throwing, balls with the radar gun, and knowing how many times to throw it, what intensity, how long do you recover in between throws. So there's a lot to it for us to do it right, to answer your question, how to do it right and safely help them develop without injuring themselves.
Yeah, another thing I want to talk about during this time of young athletes' lives is usually during these, you know, time periods, we're often going to see potentially some growth spurts for girls and boys. How do athletes handle the growth spurts with their training? Because you can get a little bit out of whack with
Yeah, for sure.
like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what is there specific drills that you suggest, or what should they do in order to maintain proper technique while still trying to adjust to their body?
Yeah, well, really, what you're doing in any skill training is coordination, right? It's very specific skills you're trying to learn to coordinate. In this sense, for arm speed, for hitting a ball, you're trying to coordinate the body to step, to rotate the chest and shoulders from one sideline to the next, to throw the ball straight, right, or hit the ball straight. So working on skill, working on strength, working on technique, all those things are important because, to your point, if a boy or girls just went through a big growth spurt, they're long, maybe they're lanky, they're uncoordinated, they don't know how to coordinate their body in space, they don't know how to move their arms and coordinate their legs. That's why we're working on arm speed, right? To make those movements happen, but we work on technique and strength first, then we get into faster arm movements once we know we've built some foundation for that technique and strength.
Yeah, absolutely. And with this as well, what are some of the most common mistakes you see in mechanics for young athletes during this time when they're developing arm speed?
Well, we've seen, obviously, we started years and years ago talking about the importance of throwing, right? That's how you can develop arm speed. And so, one of the basic things we see is people that don't really know how to teach an athlete to throw, right? So, their throwing mechanics aren't right. Um, you know, Generally, period. It's just learn. If you're going to teach an athlete how to throw, try to really appreciate and understand what good throwing mechanics are, right? And they're very similar. I'll give you a couple of tips. You know this from being one of our coaches and working with the athletes. One of the things we do is no one throws a ball with any velocity without really taking their chest and opening it, right? So if I was throwing to you, Darian, like a volleyball player, when they come in, you see it all the time. So the athletes come in and they hit like this, just high elbow, arm moves, the torso doesn't move, it doesn't open, doesn't close, doesn't turn right to the left, hips don't. And so the arm and elbow are just going up and doing like this. Well, that's not, you wouldn't ever teach someone to throw like that, but we see athletes throwing like that. We see them throwing, stepping with the wrong foot. We see them not opening their chest first, right? So those are a couple of things. I'll throw one more at you, is that when you open the chest, when you turn the chest to the right sideline, right? That's the instructions we give a right-handed hitter to not only to either throw or hit a ball, to turn the chest to the right sideline. If you watch me as I'm turning here, I'm not taking my elbow behind the body and my chest is being still. I'm turning my chest and shoulders, and if you watch what happens, the elbow goes with the turn of the chest and shoulders. So that's really good mechanics, but we'll see people with all kinds of things getting the arm way behind the body without the chest turning. So they're not going to maximize velocity. They're going to put a lot of isolated stress on the shoulder. So it's not the right technique to throw well and to hit well or and hit safely.
Yeah. And speaking of like injuries and wanting to hit safely, how does focusing on this when kids are young and first learning this skill really affect them long term compared to if they learn it later after they have developed, muscle
Yeah,
pattern?
well, you'll learn it faster at a young age, and you'll tend to retain it longer. And so maybe the analogy that a lot of adults can remember is certainly in my age, most everybody learns to ride a bike when they're 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, right? And you can ride a bike when you're a young age like that, and then you might not be on a bike for 20 or 30 years, but your brain learned it, it built it into muscle memory, and it's there even 20 or 30 years later. You can get on a bike and, like, I know how to coordinate the bike and balance on it, right? If you miss these speed development windows, not only are you missing the maximum speed, but it takes longer to learn the skill of throwing or hitting correctly, right? So the ideal scenario is probably when you're a boy or girl that you learn to throw and hit and jump and kick and land, not with big forces, not with big speed when they're in those first developmental windows, 6 to 8 for girls, 7 to 9 for boys. But then when they're 13 to 16 for boys, 11 to 13 for girls, that's when we can start adding a little bit more speed, adding a little bit more velocity, right, to that. And once again, we're not throwing maximum velocity, and we're not throwing 100 throws in a row. For us, we're probably throwing 4 or 5 throws at a time, and then we're giving that athlete some recovery, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That does. One question I have is specific drills. If there's any drills that or exercises that you can share that really helps develop quickness and agility in young athletes during this phase.
Yeah, and so are we talking about agility, like on your feet agility, like a back row player,
Yeah.
libero, back row player? Well, um, yes, work on movement, work on agility drills. So, there's the speed ladders have been around 20 or 30 years. They're okay. They get the feet moving a little bit. I like actually just having athletes move and move on the court, and just a reaction drill. If you can imagine, I was sitting here and I had a couple of athletes in front of me, and they were almost doing like fast feet, like a football drill, where their feet are kind of moving up and down, and then you're like pointing to the right, pointing to the left, and they have to take their feet. And if I was moving to the left, I might push my foot to the right, lean to the left, and work on agility to the left, to the right. They're responding to the coach's cues at a young age, making it fun when they're 6 to 8 or 7 to 9, right, depending on the gender. Teach the kids to have agility, move their feet, get down in athletic position, and move somewhere quickly like that, and do it 3 or 4 times in a row. Then let them take a break, make fun out of it, make a game out of it, right? Super important for them to do that. But that, in terms of agility, moving on the ground, moving on a court, moving in the field, moving in the sand, all those things would be fun, or it would be good, and make fun out of them, and then allow the athlete to learn to try to start organizing or coordinating their body to move and move quickly.
Yeah, and with this, what is or what importance does multi-directional speed play into this?
Yeah, it's huge. And once again, I think so many young athletes, one of the things that the U.S. gets beat up for is we get so much into playing sports at a young age, but not necessarily developing the athlete very early or very, very well rounded. So, multi sport means I need to be able to move in multiple different directions, really any different direction. So, whatever sport I play, soccer, tennis, lacrosse, volleyball, whatever, multi-sport, teach me the ability by asking me to do agility drills where I'm moving forwards, I'm moving sideways, I'm moving, diagonally forwards or back, I'm turning and rotating, going a direction. All those things, especially at those young ages, teach the athletes how to move. And it's much more important. Please don't take athletes into the weight room before they're, 12 years of age, kind of before they went to puberty, thinking that we're just going to go make them strong and that's going to make them a better athlete. Teach them to move. They don't need to be in the weight room. Teach them to move, right? They can be on a court, they can be in the sand, they can be on the beach, they can be in the backyard. Teach them to move and move quickly. And then combine movement skills with hand skills, right? So teach me to move and, like, go, take a football. That's what I did with my kids growing up. You take a Nerf football and you throw it, right? And the kid can turn and change directions and go catch with 2 hands, one hand, throw it over their head, throw a wiffle ball, throw a frisbee, right? Multi-sport, multitask, use the feet, use the hands. I mean, we're really getting way away from arm speed development, but we're not. We're talking about teaching the athlete to build some agility and speed when they're young, but yet be able to use their hands, their feet. And while we're on this, to try to make a point that just flashed into my head, let's take a sport like soccer. So many young athletes play soccer at a young age. Great, okay? And they become really good at maybe changing directions, which is good, and using their feet. Unless they're a goalie, they're not using their hands. So they get really good with maybe eye-feet coordination, kicking the ball and moving. But then if 5 or 6 years later they don't like soccer, now they want to go play volleyball or some other sport where they need their hands, they may know how to move, but they don't know how to move and use their hands to hit, to throw, to catch, or something like that. So mix not only the direction, multi-sport movements, but mix different patterns where you're using your hands, you're using your feet, you're changing directions. I mean, once again, this is way old school, but I grew up in a time, obviously many, many decades ago, but geez, and probably all the young people hear this from their parents or grandparents, like, okay, on any given night in our neighborhood, we're outside, we were playing in the backyard, we're throwing frisbees, playing, hitting wiffle balls, we're jumping on trampolines, we're doing all this stuff, we were just moving, right? And I know a lot of guys, and would like to consider myself as still a really good athlete. We were good athletes because we learned how to move in multi directions. We learned how to jump. We learned how to throw. We learned how to kick, and did a lot of backyard games or kind of neighborhood games that developed those movement skills. This day and age, now kids are having to come to us and other clinics and things like that where we're having to teach them to move, right, and throw and catch. It's unfortunate, but it's kind of the sign of the times. But it's important that will help them develop, to your question, speed and agility.
Yeah, definitely. And what are some ways that coaches can integrate things to, one, develop their speed and agility in practice, but also develop their arm speed in practice?
Uh, well, I think you just gave the answer. Integrate some drills or some skills where it's not just. I mean, that's part of the problem with any sport. Volleyball, in this case, is we go in and coaches are concerned, as they probably should be. They're trying to win games and matches, so they're talking about, you know strategic things like, we're going to run this play, we're going to do this and do that, and it's a team event, and oftentimes it's more about the tactical versus technical, right? And that's one of the reasons why there's so much athletes are going outside of volleyball club practice or high school practice. They got to get individual development on their technical aspects, their arm speed, their vertical jump, their strength and conditioning, because that stuff is not happening individually in the team practice, right? And it's not just volleyball. You choose the travel sport, soccer, lacrosse, basketball. It's all the same thing. Kids need individual development, and it doesn't necessarily happen. And it's not a negative. It just doesn't happen in team practices, right? They might get some warm up, they might get a little instruction, but for the most part, if you're going to develop your arm speed, probably not going to happen very much in a team environment.
Yeah, so that's where we talk a lot about getting outside of your team practices and getting into actual individual training, and that's when you actually get better as an athlete and really separate yourself, because all of your peers are going to team practices and everybody's doing that, right? But not everybody is doing the individual practices and developing as a player in multiple different ways. So I think that's a key that we always try to emphasize to our athletes that either train with us or follow us on social media.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, this, and I know this, but a lot of athletes, just like it was all girls in Denver this last weekend. So all the athletes that showed up there, a lot of them want to get really good at volleyball, but they have to understand it's not just going to a clinic and getting instruction. When you leave the clinic, you now have to go train that, because if you're not willing to do that, here's the deal: there are other athletes that are going to go train that, and that's who you're competing with for playing time, making better teams, et cetera, et cetera. You don't get better and don't really advance in this day and age unless you're training. It's not just instruction, learning what to do. You got to go train how to do it so you become proficient at it, right? And whether it's arm speed, foot speed, vertical jump, you don't get better unless you go do the training.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to give a shameless plug here to Powercore. If you could describe what training or what training route is the best if somebody was like, okay, well, I want to train and I'm in my development window right now, what should I do?
Well, and I'm going to go broad here for us. And yes, since you opened the door, 8-hour clinics, power hitting clinics are really a good start, right? They are really good instruction. And when the athlete leaves there, they've had instruction on mechanics and technique for power hitting. They leave with our equipment, right, our training system, and that's all very good instruction. Then they leave with, all right, now you've got to the knowledge of, now I got to go work on training this, right? So when they leave there, they could transition into, they can go do it on their own, right? They can also come and work with us in the master class for 8 weeks, right? To where we're actually going to take them through. And now we go from instruction mode, and there's instruction and training where we're actually doing the training and giving the athlete feedback, and even in live Zoom group training sessions, right? That can transition when, and those are heavy on mechanics and strength conditioning, and that's integrated in with that, especially now that we're launching the 2.0 version of the master class in December. We're going to work on arm speed. We're going to build the strength. We're going to work on technique. We're going to be throwing, and we'll supervise the athlete and show them what to do in the instructional side to develop that arm speed. And of course, then, as you know, a lot of the athletes, they leave our master class. Some of them come back and go into the advanced power hitting master class. Some of them go into the vertical jump master class, where we're focused on just on vertical jump and not so much hitting, but vert, and speed to get off the ground quickly and not get hurt when you return to the ground. Protect the ankles, knees, hips, and back.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to point out one thing. Billy said the clinics were a great entry point. I agree. And right now we are doing actually our only sale of the year for clinics. This will be ended Monday night. So if you want to sign up for 2025 clinics and you want to get the best price possible, make sure you do it now. Don't wait until 2025 because you won't get this $50 off. So you can use Clinic 25 for $50 off any clinic. I think there was just another clinic released today. So now we have 16 different clinics up on the site for 2025 and more coming soon. So make sure you're on the lookout for that. And yeah, if you want to purchase clinics, you can do it there. But like Billy said, if you want to start training right away and you don't want to wait for a clinic in 2025, you can always start our master class. That is also linked in our bio, and you can use code, I believe it's SALE25, but let me double check that really quick, for $50 off any master classes as well. Yes, sale 25 for $50 off any master classes as well. And those master classes will allow you to train right now. I know a lot of athletes right now, you guys are post high school season, pre-club season, or only have open gyms for club season. Club season hasn't really picked up yet. So make sure that if you want to train, you start that now. So by the time club season's coming around, you have a solid base to your mechanics, and you come and you can earn a starting spot on your team, which is something a lot of athletes are aiming for when they're training with us. So thank you guys all. Billy, thank you for answering all these questions today about arm speed. And thank you to everybody that listened in and asked any questions. If you guys have any other questions, you can always DM us or leave any comments on our socials, and we will be sure to get back to you. But yeah, I hope you guys have a great day.